The child's voice carried through the observation deck like starlight through darkness. Arya Thorne, 10 years old, sat cross-legged before the massive viewport, her small fingers dancing through a holographic projection of the Andromeda Galaxy.
Your people
300
started
billion
this conflict.
stars spun
Your
slowly
species
in the
encroached
air
on our
before her,
territory.
each
Lies,
one
you
a
attacked
point of
first.
light
Then you
that she
will
could
fall.
touch, examine, dream about. She sang softly to herself an old Earth melody her mother had taught her years ago. Starlight star, bright
Faster!
first
We're almost
star
there!
I see tonight.
I'm scared!
The
Stay
gateway
with me!
station hummed around her, a constant background symphony of life support systems and artificial gravity generators. 17,000 souls called this place home. Humans mostly, scientists and engineers and military personnel. The bridge between Earth and the greater galaxy. Outside the viewport, space stretched infinite and empty. No stars here. They were too far from the galactic core, positioned at the edge of known space where the darkness between systems grew thick and absolute. Arya didn't mind the darkness, not anymore. Her mother had taught her that darkness was just space waiting for light. I wish I may, I wish I might. The hologram shifted. Arya reached out her fingers, passing through a spiral arm, and the projection zoomed in. Individual star systems appeared. Planets, moons. The mathematical precision of orbital mechanics made visible, beautiful, comprehensible. She loved this. The way numbers became shapes. The way physics became art. The way the universe revealed its secrets to anyone patient enough to listen. Someday she thought she would build ships that could touch those distant stars. Someday she would map galaxies no human had ever seen. Someday she would... The station lurched. Not much. Just a tremor, barely perceptible. But Arya had lived aboard Gateway her entire life. She knew every vibration, every sound, every rhythm of the massive structure. This was wrong. The hologram flickered, died, and then the alarms began. Red lights erupted across the observation deck. Klaxons screamed their warning into the suddenly electric air. Emergency protocols activated with mechanical precision, blast doors beginning their slow descent from the ceiling. Arya's breath caught in her throat. She knew that sound. Every child born after the war knew that sound. Every human being who had survived the years when the sky turned black and shadows pulled people apart knew that sound. Umbral proximity alert. The darkness wasn't empty after all. Footsteps thundered behind her. Heavy boots on metal deck plating. A woman's voice sharp with command and edged with something else. Something that might have been fear, if fear were something Commander Cassandra Thorne allowed herself to feel. Arya, move. Arya turned. Her mother burst through the observation deck entrance, still in her duty uniform. Dark hair pulled back tight, eyes scanning the room with practiced efficiency. Behind her, Lieutenant Commander Sienna Voss appeared weapon drawn, tactical display flickering on her wrist. Cass crossed the distance to her daughter in 3 long strides. She grabbed Arya's hand, pulled her up, started moving toward the emergency shelter that every section of Gateway maintained. Mom, what? Not now, run. They ran. The corridor outside was controlled chaos, people rushing in every direction, some toward duty stations, others toward shelters. Children crying, adults shouting orders, the organized panic of a military installation under threat. Arya's heart hammered against her ribs. Her hand gripped her mother's with desperate strength. She could hear her own breathing loud and ragged in her ears. Through the station's internal speakers, a calm automated voice delivered information that felt anything but calm. Unidentified contact detected at bearing 273, Mark 14. Range 80,000 kilometers and closing. Classification unknown. All personnel to designated safe zones. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. 80,000 kilometers. Close. Too close. Arya knew the numbers. Knew that at relativistic speeds, 80,000 kilometers was nothing. A few seconds. A heartbeat. They reached the shelter, a reinforced compartment deep in the station's core designed to withstand everything from hull breaches to weapons fire. The door was already open, families streaming inside. Cass pushed Arya through, followed her in, spun to face the door controls. Sienna appeared beside her, breathing hard. Commander, external sensors have a partial lock. Whatever it is, it's not using conventional propulsion. The signature matches. I know what it matches. Cass's jaw tightened. Arya watched her mother's reflection in the polished metal of the shelter wall, saw something in that face that she'd only seen once before years ago when the news came about her father. Eric Thorne, lieutenant, good man, dead in a skirmish at the edge of the Tau Ceti system when Arya was 2 years old. Dead because something that shouldn't exist had reached out from the spaces between dimensions and pulled his ship apart. Dead because the universe was darker and more dangerous than anyone wanted to admit. Mom, Arya's voice came out smaller than she intended. Are the shadow things back? For just a moment, Cass's composure cracked. She looked at her daughter, and in her eyes, Arya saw something ancient and terrible. A memory, a wound that had never quite healed. The same wound that lived in every human who remembered the war. The same wound that would never fully close. Then the moment passed. Cass's expression hardened. She knelt down, put both hands on Arya's shoulders. Listen to me. Gateway's defenses are the best in the fleet. We have protocols for this. You're safe here. Do you understand? Arya nodded, but her throat felt tight. I need you to stay with Sienna, no matter what happens. Can you do that? Another nod. Cass pulled her daughter close, a brief, fierce embrace, then stood and moved toward the door. Her hand hovered over the control panel. Commander, Sienna's voice was quiet. You don't have to. Yes, I do. The shelter doors sealed with a hydraulic hiss. Through the small, reinforced viewport, Arya watched her mother disappear down the corridor at a dead run, heading toward the command center, heading toward whatever was out there in the dark. Sienna sat down beside her, placed a hand on her shoulder, said nothing. Around them, other families huddled together, parents holding children, spouses gripping each other's hands. Everyone waiting. Everyone remembering the stories their grandparents had told about the last time the shadows came. September 15th, 2187. First contact. The day humanity learned that the universe was not empty. The day the darkness learned to hunt. The automated voice continued its updates. Contact at 70,000 kilometers. Defensive grid activating. All non-essential personnel remain in shelter positions. 60,000, 50. Arya closed her eyes and made a wish, though she knew wishes were just mathematics by another name. Probability and hope mixing together into something that felt like prayer. Please let her come back. Please, 40,000 kilometers. The station's point defense systems came online. Arya couldn't see them, but she could feel them. The deep vibration of magnetic accelerators charging. The subtle shift in gravity as massive amounts of power rerouted through Gateway's infrastructure. She'd studied the systems, knew how they worked. Railguns that could punch holes through asteroids. Energy batteries that could vaporize incoming missiles. Shields that could withstand nuclear detonations. But would any of it work against Shadow's 30,000? Through the viewport, Arya saw other children watching their parents' faces, looking for reassurance, for hope, for any sign that this would be okay. She saw the fear, saw the memories, saw the scars that 2 centuries hadn't healed. 20,000. The lights flickered, just once. But it was enough. Someone whispered a prayer. Old words in a language Arya didn't recognize. But she understood the meaning anyway. Please, God. Not again. 15,000. Arya's hands were shaking. She pressed them together, tried to stop the trembling, tried to be brave like her mother. 10,000. And then silence. The klaxons cut off mid-wail. The red lights steadied, then shifted to amber. The automated voice returned, but this time the tone had changed. Still calm, still professional. But underneath was that relief. Contact neutralized, threat eliminated, all clear. Repeat, all clear. Personnel may return to standard duty stations. The shelter remained quiet for another 3 heartbeats. Then someone laughed. A shaky, disbelieving sound that broke the tension like shattering glass. The door unsealed. People began to file out, talking quickly, nervously, the words tumbling over each other in their rush to fill the silence. Arya didn't move. She stayed seated, hands gripped together in her lap, waiting. 5 minutes passed, then footsteps in the corridor. Familiar rhythm, familiar weight. Cass appeared in the doorway. Their eyes met. Arya launched herself forward. Her mother caught her, lifted her, held her with arms that trembled just slightly despite their strength. I told you, Cass whispered into her daughter's hair. I promised, never again. Arya buried her face against her mother's shoulder and tried very hard not to cry. She was 10 years old, almost grown. She could be brave. But right now, wrapped in her mother's arms, hearing her heartbeat steady and strong, Arya allowed herself to be a child again. Just for a moment. Just until the fear passed. In the station's command center, Commander Cassandra Thorne stood before the main display and studied the data streaming across multiple screens. The probe had been small, barely 50 meters across. Not a warship, not an invasion force. Just a scout testing defenses, gathering information. An Umbral scout. The first confirmed contact in 8 years. Gateway's defensive grid had destroyed it at 19,000 kilometers. A clean kill. No damage to the station. No casualties. But the message was clear. They were watching again. Analysis complete, Commander. Sienna's voice pulled Cass from her thoughts. Signature matches archived data from the Tau Ceti encounter. Same dark matter dispersion pattern. Same dimensional phase variance. No question about what it was. Cass nodded slowly. She'd known. From the moment the alarm sounded, she'd known. 8 years of relative quiet. 8 years of hoping foolishly, perhaps, that the withdrawal was permanent. Hope, as it turned out, was a luxury humanity could no longer afford. Notify Admiral Core, Cass said. Full report, and contact the Galactic Council. Tell them Commander Thorne requests an immediate audience. The Council... Sienna's eyebrows rose. Ma'am, they're not scheduled to convene for another 2 weeks. The formal first contact protocols. Protocols are about to become irrelevant, Sienna. Cass turned from the display. Her expression was carved from stone. If the Umbral are probing our defenses again, that means they're preparing for something. And if they're preparing, we need allies. You think the Council will help? I think the Council doesn't know what's coming. And ignorance, Cass paused, ignorance will get them all killed. She walked to the viewport that dominated the command center's far wall. Beyond, the reinforced glass space stretched empty and dark. But somewhere out there in dimensions human eyes couldn't perceive, in the substrate of dark matter that held galaxies together, things moved. Things that had once tried to exterminate every human being in existence. Things that might try again. Cass touched the viewport's surface with her fingertips. The glass was cold, unforgiving, like the vacuum beyond. My grandmother was there, she said quietly. Commander Ilara Thorne, Denver, September 16th, 2187. She watched 4 million people die in 6 hours. Watched the sky turn black. Watched shadows pull her friends apart. Sienna stepped up beside her, waited. She died before I was born, Cass continued, but her words lived on, passed down through my father, then to me. She spent her life making sure humanity would never be helpless again. Helped design the first dark matter ships. Helped develop the protocols. Helped train the first generation of crews who could fight in dimensions normal matter couldn't reach. Cass's reflection in the glass looked tired, older than 47. She recorded everything. Left messages, instructions, warnings. Cass reached beneath her uniform collar, pulled out a chain. A medal hung from it, tarnished with age. The inscription, barely visible, never forget, never again. This was hers. My father gave it to me when I took command of Resolute. Said Ilara wanted me to have it, wanted me to remember what we're fighting for. You honor her memory, Commander. I try. Cass dropped the medal back beneath her uniform, turned to face her XO. Signal the fleet. I want USS Resolute and all 46 dark matter vessels ready to deploy within 12 hours. Full combat loadout, no exceptions. Destination, the Galactic Council Station. It's time we introduced ourselves properly. Sienna smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. The Council's going to get a hell of a surprise. Good. Surprises build character. Cass moved toward the door, then paused. And Sienna, make sure Arya is packed and ready. She comes with us. Commander, regulations. I don't care about regulations. My daughter stays where I can protect her. If that means breaking protocol, so be it. The universe already took my husband. It doesn't get my daughter, too. Sienna hesitated, then nodded. Understood, ma'am. Cass left the command center and made her way through Gateway's corridors toward her quarters. The station had returned to normal operations. People moved with purpose. The fear had faded, replaced by the comfortable routine of duty, but Cass could still feel it. That electric tension, that knowledge that the universe was bigger and darker and more dangerous than most people wanted to admit. Her quarters were small, functional, a bed, a desk, a wall of photographs. Arya was there, sitting on the bed legs tucked under her, studying a tablet. She looked up when Cass entered. Mom, the defensive grid recorded a 97% efficiency rating on the intercept. That's 3% better than the simulations predicted. I ran the numbers. If we adjust the targeting algorithm to account for dark matter phase variance, area, the girl stopped. Set down the tablet. Her expression shifted from excited to uncertain. Cass sat beside her daughter on the bed. For a long moment, she just looked at this child who was growing up too fast, who understood mathematics and physics better than most adults, who thought about defensive grids and targeting algorithms instead of dolls and games. War did that, made children grow up before their time, made them understand things no child should have to understand. We're leaving Gateway, Cass said. Tomorrow morning, you, me, and the entire dark matter fleet. Where are we going? To meet some people. Important people, people who need to hear a story. Arya's eyes widened slightly. The story about the Umbral, about what happened. Yes, but you never talk about that. Not really. You always say, I know what I said. Cass reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her daughter's ear. But things have changed. That probe today, that wasn't random. That was reconnaissance. They're testing us, learning our capabilities. And that means they're planning something. She paused. You're 10 years old. You survived an umbral proximity alert today without panicking. You ran the intercept efficiency numbers while the adults were still trying to calm down. She smiled. It was a sad smile. You're not too young anymore. I wish you were. But wishes don't change reality. Arya was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, are you scared? The question hit harder than it should have. Was she scared? Yes. Terrified. But not of the council, not of the politics and the diplomacy and the inevitable skepticism they'd face. She was scared of what came after. Scared of the war that was coming. Scared that this time 47 ships wouldn't be enough. Scared that the promise she'd made never again might be one she couldn't keep. But she couldn't say that. Not to Arya, not to the daughter who looked at her like she had all the answers. I'm cautious, Cass said instead. There's a difference. Fear is when you don't know what you're facing. Caution is when you do and you respect it. She paused. I know what's out there. I've seen the reports, read the histories, studied every battle, every engagement, every failure and success. I respect the threat, but I'm not afraid, because we're prepared, and because I have something worth fighting for. She touched Arya's cheek gently. You. Arya leaned into her mother's hand. Promise you'll come back from whatever happens out there. Cass thought about Eric, thought about the transmission she'd received 8 years ago. 3 words that had shattered her world. Lieutenant Thorne deceased. She thought about all the promises that had been broken by circumstance and violence and the cruel randomness of war. She couldn't promise, couldn't guarantee. The universe didn't work that way, but she could try. I promise I'll fight too, she said. It would have to be enough. The USS Resolute hung in space like a wound in reality. Ambassador Aldrich Corvin stood at the observation window of the Galactic Council station and watched the human vessels arrive, and something cold settled deep in his chest. 400 years of life, 400 years of diplomatic service to the Valoran hegemony, 400 years of welcoming new species to the Council of mediating disputes, of maintaining the careful balance of power that kept the galaxy from tearing itself apart. In all that time, Aldrich had never seen ships like these. 47 vessels dropped out of hyperspace at the designated coordinates, appearing with the sudden violence of a knife thrust. But the manner of their arrival was not what made Aldrich's primary and secondary hearts both skip a beat. It was what they looked like, or rather, what they didn't look like. The ships were black, but not the black of painted metal or ceramic composites. This was a deeper black, and an absolute black. The kind of black that shouldn't exist in normal space, that suggested dimensions folded in on themselves, realities compressed and layered, and utterly wrong. The vessels seemed to drink light, swallow it, consume it like living things feeding on photons. And their edges, Aldrich leaned closer to the viewport, his scaled skin rippling with involuntary tension. The edges of the human ships weren't quite there. They blurred, flickered, as if the vessels existed in 2 places simultaneously, caught between states of being partially anchored to normal space and partially somewhere else. Somewhere that Aldrich's instruments couldn't detect. Somewhere impossible. What in the name of the founders? The whisper came from Admiral Velcros, the Kree Dominion's military representative. He stood nearby, his own scanner device held out before him, its display flickering with error messages and warning symbols. Around them, other ambassadors had gathered. 12 great powers, 12 civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. They pressed against the observation windows, their various forms of anatomies all rigid with the same emotion. Confusion. And underneath it, though few would admit it, fear. Sensor analysis, High Chancellor Mordane's voice carried across the chamber. The ancient Valoran was perhaps the only being in the room older than Aldrich, his scales gone gray with centuries, but his mind still sharp as fresh-forged steel. A young Valoran technician, scales still bright with youth, looked up from her console. Her hands trembled slightly. Inconclusive, Chancellor. Our instruments they're not malfunctioning exactly. They're receiving data. But the data doesn't make sense. The ships register as partially phased out of normal space-time. They have mass signatures inconsistent with their visible dimensions. The gravitational distortion around them suggests she stopped, swallowed. It suggests they're denser than collapsed matter, which is impossible. Recalculate, Velcros ordered. His voice had lost its usual arrogance. I've run the calculations 6 times, Admiral. The results are consistent. Either our understanding of physics is fundamentally wrong, or these ships exist in a state that our science hasn't accounted for. Aldrich watched the largest of the human vessels, presumably the flagship, maneuver closer to the station. It moved with a grace that belied its size, sliding through space like oil through water, silent and smooth and utterly unnatural. The ship made Aldrich's skin crawl in ways he couldn't quite articulate. It was wrong, not evil, not malevolent, just wrong in the way that a reflection in a mirror is wrong when it moves independently of the object it's supposed to reflect. Wrong in the way that certain mathematical proofs are wrong even when the logic appears sound. Wrong in a fundamental reality-breaking way. They're just humans, Counselor Lyra said softly. The Tassari diplomat's silver skin had gone dull with concern. 300 years of space travel, barely enough time to colonize their own star system. How could they possibly have developed technology that our sensors can't analyze? No one answered, because no one had an answer. The human vessels completed their approach and took up positions around the station. Defensive formation, professional, precise, the kind of formation you'd expect from a military fleet with decades of experience, or centuries. Aldrich's console chimed, a message from the station's docking authority. The human delegation was requesting permission to come aboard. He activated the communications channel. Human vessels, this is Ambassador Aldrich Corvin of the Valoran Hegemony, speaking on behalf of the Galactic Council. You are cleared for docking at Port 7. We look forward to formal first contact proceedings. Port 7 was one of the primary docking facilities, reserved for major powers, for civilizations that had earned their place through time and achievement. Aldrich could almost feel the disapproval radiating from some of the other ambassadors. Humans should dock at the lower ports, the ones reserved for newcomers, for species still finding their footing among the stars. But looking at those ships, those impossible vessels that shouldn't exist, Aldrich's instincts, honed over 4 centuries of survival, screamed that treating these humans as inferiors would be a mistake, possibly a fatal one. The response came 30 seconds later, a woman's voice, calm, professional, with an accent that marked her as coming from Earth's North American continent. Thank you, Ambassador Corvin. USS Resolute acknowledges. We'll be docking within the hour. The channel closed. Velcros moved up beside Aldrich, his heavy frame casting a shadow across the viewport. You gave them Port 7. I did. That's reserved for... I know what it's reserved for, Admiral. Aldrich didn't take his eyes off the human ships. And I made a judgment call. Those vessels are either the most elaborate bluff in galactic history, or these humans have capabilities we don't understand. Either way, I'd prefer to treat them with respect until we know which it is. Velcros was silent for a moment. Then, you think they're a threat? I think, Aldrich said slowly, that any species capable of building ships our instruments can't properly analyze deserves our full attention. And I think dismissing them as primitives would be the kind of arrogance that gets civilizations destroyed. He turned away from the viewport and made his way toward the greeting hall. Behind him, the other ambassadors followed their conversations, a low buzz of speculation and concern. The hall was impressive, designed to be, vast cathedral ceiling, walls of polished stone imported from a dozen different worlds. Lighting that shifted and flowed in patterns meant to soothe and inspire. This was where the Council welcomed new species to the galactic community, where first contact became formal alliance, where history was made. Aldrich took his place in the traditional semicircle formation, flanked by the other senior ambassadors. They arranged themselves by age of civilization. Aldrich's people, the Valoran, had the place of honor at the center. 100,000 years of space travel earned certain privileges. The humans would enter there at the far end of the hall and walk the length of it to stand before the assembled might of galactic civilization. It was meant to be humbling, to remind newcomers of their place in the greater order. Aldrich wondered if it would work on beings who flew ships that bent reality. The minutes dragged past, and then the doors opened. 5 humans entered the greeting hall. Aldrich's first thought was how unremarkable they looked. Soft skin, no natural armor, no scales or chitin or protective adaptations. Small eyes, fragile frames. They wore simple uniforms, dark blue with minimal decoration. They could have been any of 100 species the Council had welcomed over the millennia. Unremarkable, unexceptional. Except for the woman at the front of the group, Commander Cassandra Thorne. Aldrich had reviewed her file during the approach. 47 years old, third-generation military. Lost her husband in a border skirmish 8 years ago. Single parent to one daughter. Decorated officer. Solid service record. Nothing that should have made her stand out. But seeing her in person, Aldrich understood that files could only tell you so much. She moved like someone who had seen violence and survived it. Not with the swagger of a warrior eager to prove themselves, but with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what they were capable of and felt no need to demonstrate it unnecessarily. Her eyes swept the hall with professional efficiency, cataloging threats, assessing positions, measuring distances. Soldier's eyes, old eyes in a relatively young face, eyes that had seen things Aldrich couldn't imagine. And beside her holding her hand was a child, a human girl. Perhaps 10 years old, dark hair pulled back in a simple braid, wearing a smaller version of the same uniform, looking around the hall with wonder and just a hint of fear. The assembled ambassadors stirred. Bringing a child to a formal first contact proceeding was unusual. Improper, some might say. Thorne either didn't notice or didn't care. She walked the length of the hall with her daughter at her side, the other 4 humans following at a respectful distance. When she reached the center of the semicircle, she stopped and looked directly at Aldrich. For a moment, their eyes met. Aldrich felt something shift in his chest, a recognition perhaps, or a warning. This woman had seen things, terrible things, and she had survived them. And that survival had carved something hard and unyielding into her soul, something that reminded Aldrich of veterans he'd known from ancient wars. The ones who smiled but never quite reached their eyes. The ones who carried ghosts. Ambassadors of the Galactic Council, Thorne said. Her voice was clear and steady. It carried across the hall without need for amplification. I am Commander Cassandra Thorne of the United Earth Defense Force. On behalf of humanity, I thank you for receiving us. Aldrich stepped forward. As the senior ambassador present, it was his duty to respond. Commander Thorne, welcome to the Galactic Council Station. We hope this marks the beginning of a long and productive relationship between humanity and the civilizations represented here. The words were formal, traditional, meaningless. Thorne smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible. But Aldrich saw it, and something about that expression made his skin crawl again. She knew. She knew that the ambassadors had seen her ships, knew that their instruments had failed, knew that every being in this hall was confused and concerned and trying desperately not to show it. And she was not afraid. Not even a little. Thank you, Ambassador Corvin, she said. Humanity has waited a long time for this moment. Admiral Velcros couldn't contain himself. 300 years of space travel, that's not long by our standards. Thorne turned her attention to the Kree Admiral. No, it's not. She didn't elaborate, didn't defend, didn't justify. Just acknowledged the point and moved on. The silence stretched. Aldrich felt the tension building. This was wrong, all of it. First contact should be smooth, carefully orchestrated, a dance where everyone knew the steps. But Thorne wasn't dancing. She was standing still, waiting, letting the silence do its work. Finally, Aldrich broke it. Your ships are unusual, Commander. Are they? Our sensors had difficulty analyzing them. I apologize for any inconvenience. Human technology can be unpredictable. It wasn't an explanation, wasn't even an attempt at an explanation. It was deflection, polite professional deflection. And Thorne knew he knew it. The child Arya, according to the files, tugged on her mother's sleeve, whispered something too quiet for Aldrich to hear. Thorne knelt down, spoke softly to her daughter, then stood and addressed the assembly again. Perhaps we can discuss our technology later, Aldrich suggested. For now, let us focus on the formal ceremonies. There will be time for questions afterward. Of course, Thorne said. We look forward to it. The ceremonies began. They were long, involved speeches in a dozen languages, ritual exchanges of gifts and greetings, performances meant to showcase cultural heritage. Through it all, Thorne stood quietly, her daughter at her side. She responded to questions with short, polite answers, revealed nothing substantial about Earth or human capabilities or intentions. She was a perfect diplomat, giving away nothing while appearing to cooperate fully. It was infuriating and impressive, but every now and then Aldrich caught her looking past the assembled dignitaries, looking out the viewport toward her ships. And when she did, something changed in her expression. It wasn't pride, wasn't satisfaction. It was something that looked almost like grief, like remembering the cost of building those impossible vessels, like carrying the weight of everyone who had died to make them possible. What have these humans seen, Aldrich wondered. What have they survived? What shaped them into warriors who could build ships that frightened beings 10,000 years their senior? He didn't know, but he intended to find out. The ceremonies finally ended. The ambassadors began to disperse, breaking into smaller groups, conversations already turning toward analysis and speculation. Aldrich approached Thorne before she could leave. "Commander, a word if you please." Thorne turned to face him. Up close, he could see the fine lines around her eyes, the scar tissue on her hands. The wear and tear of a life lived on the edge. "Of course, Ambassador. Your ships interest me. I've studied vessel design for many years. I would like to know more about how they were constructed." "I'm afraid that information is classified. Surely you can tell me something, in the spirit of cooperation between our peoples." Thorne was quiet for a moment, considering. Then, "Our ships have served us well." "Against whom?" The question slipped out before Aldrich could stop himself. He hadn't meant to ask, hadn't meant to be so direct, but now that the words were spoken, he couldn't take them back. Thorne's eyes searched his face, as if deciding whether to trust him, whether he could handle the truth. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Ambassador Corvin, do you know why humanity developed space travel? To explore, to expand, the same reasons as every species." "No," Thorne shook her head. "We developed space travel because we had no choice. Because something found us. Something that exists in the spaces between stars. Something that wanted us dead." And the cold in Aldrich's chest spread through his entire body. "What are you talking about?" "Not here. Not now." Thorne glanced at her daughter, who was studying a holographic display of the station's layout with intense concentration. "But soon the Council will learn the truth. And when you do, you'll understand why our ships look the way they do. Why we trained for 2 centuries, why we came here." She turned and walked away, Arya at her side, leaving Aldrich alone with his thoughts and a growing sense of dread. He stood there for a long time, staring out the viewport at the human ships. They hung in space like dark omens, silent, patient, waiting. And for the first time in 400 years, Ambassador Aldrich Corvin felt something he had almost forgotten. Fear. Not of the humans, of what they were running from, of what they knew, of the truth that was coming. 3 days after the formal ceremonies, Commander Cassandra Thorne stood before the full assembly of the Galactic Council and prepared to tell them a story that would change everything. The council chamber was vast, a circular auditorium carved from compressed stellar matter designed to hold representatives from every major civilization in the known galaxy. Tiered seating rose in concentric rings around a central platform where Thorne now stood alone except for a holographic display console and the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. 1,200 beings filled the chamber, ambassadors and military officers and scientific advisors, scales and skin and chitin and forms that defied easy classification. 1,200 pairs of eyes or eye equivalents all focused on one human woman. Thorne felt their skepticism like a physical force. Saw it in the way they leaned back in their seats, arms crossed, expressions ranging from polite interest to barely concealed disdain. These were the powers that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. The ancient civilizations that had mapped the stars while humanity was still learning to make fire. They had seen it all, conquered it all, understood it all, or so they thought. Thorne activated the display. A 3-dimensional map of Earth appeared, rotating slowly in the air above the platform. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds, beautiful, peaceful, home. "September 15th, 2187, Thorne began. Her voice carried across the chamber with perfect clarity, amplified by the station's acoustics. "The day humanity made first contact with alien life." She touched the display. The image of Earth froze, then began to change. Darkness spread across the northern hemisphere. Not night, not clouds, something else. Something that moved with terrible purpose, flowing across continents like ink spilled across paper. It was not the contact we'd hoped for. The chamber was silent, watching. Thorne felt her chest tighten. She'd reviewed this presentation a dozen times, knew every image, every data point, every terrible second of what she was about to show them. But knowing didn't make it easier. 3 billion people died in the first 24 hours. We didn't understand what was happening. Didn't know what we were fighting. Our weapons passed through them like they weren't there. Our shields did nothing. Our ships were torn apart by forces we couldn't measure or predict. The display shifted, showed cities going dark, continents burning, orbital installations disintegrating, all in silence because there was no sound in space and the screaming was too terrible to reproduce. Thorn forced herself to continue. By the end of the first week, half of humanity was gone. 6 billion souls, erased, as if we'd never existed. She touched the display again. The image changed to show something that made several council members recoil. A shadow, but not a normal shadow. This one had mass, substance. It twisted through three-dimensional space with geometries that hurt to look at, angles that shouldn't exist, dimensions that folded back on themselves. We call them the umbral. They exist in dark matter substrate, the invisible framework that holds the galaxy together. 95% of the universe. And we never knew anything lived there. Aldrich Corvin leaned forward in his seat, his scaled face intent. You're saying these creatures exist in dark matter space? That's impossible. Dark matter doesn't interact with normal matter except through gravity. There's no way for biological processes. They're not biological, not in any way we understand. Thorne pulled up a different image. Sensor data, mathematical models. They're structures of condensed dark matter, self-organizing, self-aware. And to them, normal matter is primitive, inferior. We were insects. Interesting perhaps, but ultimately disposable. She paused. Let that sink in. The chamber remained silent, but the quality of the silence had changed. Skepticism was giving way to something else, something that might have been concern. My grandmother was there, Thorne said quietly. Commander Alara Thorne. She was stationed in Denver when the umbral came. She watched 4 million people die in 6 hours. Watched the sky turn black. Watched her friends and colleagues pulled apart by shadows that shouldn't exist. Thorne touched her chest, felt the outline of the metal beneath her uniform. Ilara's metal, the one with the inscription that had become humanity's mantra. She survived, barely. And she died before I was born, but her words lived on. She spent the rest of her life making sure humanity would never be helpless again. She helped design the first dark matter ships, helped develop the protocols, helped train the first generation of crews who could fight in dimensions normal matter couldn't reach. Thorne's voice grew stronger. Her last recorded message was simple: never forget, never again. Those words have guided every decision humanity has made for 217 years. The display shifted once more, showed a timeline, 2187 to 2240. 53 years compressed into flowing data streams. The war lasted 53 years. We lost our outer colonies, lost Earth's moon, lost Mars. Our population dropped from 12 billion to 2 billion. We were facing extinction, and there was nothing the greatest military minds in human history could do to stop it. Velcro spoke up, his voice hard. Then how did you survive? If these umbral are as powerful as you claim, we got lucky. Thorne met the Kree Admiral's eyes. 18 months into the war, a nuclear strike wounded one of them. Not killed, just wounded. But it left traces. Physical matter from the dark matter dimension. We studied those traces. Spent 17 months reverse engineering a technology we didn't understand from beings we couldn't comprehend. She pulled up technical schematics. The assembled scientists in the chamber leaned closer, their instruments already in analyzing, measuring, trying to understand. We discovered phase manipulation, a way to exist partially in dark matter space. It required exotic matter, massive energy expenditure, technology that pushed every physical law to its breaking point. But it worked. The schematics showed a ship, the prototype, humanity's first attempt at building a vessel that could fight in dimensions normal matter couldn't reach. We called her the Defiance. 200 crew members. Volunteers, all of them, because we didn't know if she would work. Didn't know if she'd survive the phase transition. Thorne's voice dropped. We sent her into dark matter space and waited. 199 came back. The chamber stirred. But she worked. We could fight them. Not win maybe, but fight. Survive. So we built more. 12 ships, then 20, then 47. We trained crews, developed tactics, learned to navigate dimensions that had no up or down, no past or future, where physics was a suggestion and reality was negotiable. The display showed battle after battle, humans fighting shadows, ships phasing in and out of normal space, victory measured in survival rather than conquest. By year 30, we'd fought them to a stalemate. We couldn't push them back. They couldn't break us. The war ground on, year after year, generation after generation. Children grew up knowing nothing but war. Adults forgot what peace felt like. Thorne touched the console. The timeline advanced to 2400. And then in year 53, they withdrew. No explanation, no negotiation, no peace treaty. They just left. pulled back into dark matter space, and went silent. She looked around the chamber, saw the confusion on their faces, the questions forming. We don't know why. Maybe we'd become too costly to destroy. Maybe they found something else that interested them more. Maybe they simply grew bored with us. The display went dark. For 164 years, we've waited for them to come back. We rebuilt our population, improved our ships, developed protocols and trained new crews. 47 vessels, 9,400 people. That's our entire dark matter fleet. Everything we have. Thorne's jaw tightened. And 3 days ago, an Umbral probe attacked Gateway Station. The first confirmed contact in 8 years. The chamber exploded into noise. Ambassadors shouted questions. Military officers demanded data. Scientists called for verification. The careful order dissolved into chaos. High Chancellor Mordain raised one aged hand, and somehow, impossibly, the noise died down. Commander Thorne, you're asking us to believe that there exists a form of life we cannot detect, that lives in dark matter space that nearly exterminated your species, and that may now threaten the entire galaxy. I'm not asking you to believe anything, Chancellor. I'm telling you what happened. What's happening now. Whether you believe it or not doesn't change the facts. Counselor Lyris stood, her silver skin catching the light. Surely there must be some mistake. If these Umbral exist, why haven't we detected them? Why haven't we encountered them in our thousands of years of space travel? Because you don't go where they live, Thorne said simply. You stay in normal space. You map stars and colonize planets and build your civilizations in the comfortable dimensions where matter behaves predictably. The Umbral exist in the gaps, the spaces between, and they only emerge when something catches their attention. Like what? Aldrich asked. Thorne turned to face him. Like unusual energy signatures. Like early spacecraft generating exotic particle emissions. Like humanity stumbling blindly into technologies we barely understood and accidentally ringing a dinner bell that echoed across dimensions. She paused. We were lucky. We were small, isolated. When the Umbral attacked, they focused on us, left the rest of the galaxy alone. The implication hung heavy in the air. But now you're here, Aldrich said slowly. Now you're making contact with other civilizations, trading, sharing technology, and drawing attention. Yes. Thorne didn't flinch from the accusation in his voice. The probe at Gateway wasn't random. They're watching again, and this time it's not just humanity in their sight. The chamber fell silent once more. Somewhere in the tiered seating in a private observation booth designed for family members and dignitaries, Arya Thorne sat and watched her mother address the council. Beside her, Lieutenant Commander Sienna Voss kept a careful eye on the girl. Watched the way Arya's hands gripped the armrests of her seat, the way her eyes never left her mother's figure on the platform below. This was the first time Arya had heard the full story. Oh, she'd known the basics. Everyone did. The war, the Umbral, the terrible years when humanity nearly died. But hearing it laid out in detail, seeing the images, understanding just how close they'd come to extinction. Sienna reached out, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. I'm here, she said. I'm here. Sienna reached out, placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. Your mother's very brave, she said quietly. Arya nodded, couldn't speak. Her throat felt too tight. On the platform below, Thorne was showing more images now. The dark matter ships, the training regimens, the protocols that had consumed humanity's last 2 centuries. We didn't spend that time hiding, Thorne said. We spent it preparing, building, learning, making sure that if the Umbral came back, we'd be ready. She looked directly up at the observation booth, directly at Arya. Their eyes met across the distance, and Arya understood. Finally, completely understood. Why her mother was always working, always training, always preparing. Why she'd brought Arya here instead of leaving her safely on Earth. Why she carried that medal from grandmother Alara, the one with the inscription that Arya had read 100 times but never truly comprehended until now. This wasn't paranoia, wasn't obsession. This was love. The fierce, terrible love of a mother who would burn down dimensions rather than let her daughter suffer what her grandmother had suffered. A single tear broke free, traced its way down Arya's cheek. Sienna squeezed her shoulder gently. The presentation continued. Thorne was explaining the technical aspects now. How dark matter ships worked, how they could phase between dimensions, how they manipulated gravity on scales that should be impossible. The scientists in the chamber leaned forward, instruments out analyzing every word. But halfway through a particularly complex explanation about exotic matter, Stabilization, the alarm sounded. Not the station's alarm. Something else. Thorne's wrist console lit up. Emergency beacon. Military priority. She touched it, and her face went pale. "What is it?" Aldrich asked. Thorne looked up at the assembled council. When she spoke, her voice was flat, controlled, the voice of someone delivering terrible news. Tasari 7, one of Counselor Lyris's colony worlds. It just went dark. Lyris stood abruptly. "Dark? What do you mean dark?" All communications cut off simultaneously. Orbital sensors detected massive dark matter dispersion patterns. And then, nothing. The implications settled over the chamber like a shroud. 12 million Tasari lived on that world. Farmers and artists, and children and families. 12 million souls who had just disappeared from the Galactic communication network. "Send a patrol fleet," Mordain ordered. "Immediately, we need—" "It's too late, Chancellor." Thorne's voice was flat, hard, the voice of someone who had seen this before. "By the time your ships get there, everyone will be dead. That's how the Umbral work. Fast, absolute, no survivors." "You don't know that. Perhaps it's a technical malfunction." "I know exactly what it is." Thorne deactivated her presentation. The holographic images dissolved. "I've seen it before. 17 times in the last 3 months. Small outposts, research stations, colony worlds on the edge of explored space. All of them went dark the same way. And when we investigated, we found nothing. Empty buildings, silent streets, no bodies, no destruction, just absence." She met Lyris's eyes. The Tasari counselor's silver skin had gone completely dull, almost gray. "I'm sorry, Counselor. Your people are gone." Lyris sat down slowly, like her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. "This is impossible," Velcro said, but his voice lacked conviction now. "Our defenses—" "Your defenses are designed to fight enemies in normal space," Thorne interrupted. "The Umbral don't exist in normal space. They phase through your shields. Your weapons pass through them. You might as well be firing at shadows. Then what do we do?" The question came from somewhere in the tiered seating, a junior ambassador, young voice, scared. What do we do? The question every civilization asked when they realized the universe was bigger and darker than they'd imagined. The question humanity had asked 164 years ago. Thorne looked around the chamber, saw fear beginning to replace skepticism. Alliance, true equality, not patronizing alliance. True equality, not patronizing agreements that keep us dependent on your approval. Full council membership, shared technology, combined forces. "In exchange for what?" Mordain asked. "In exchange for survival. We teach you how to fight them, how to detect them, how to build ships that can reach into dark matter space and strike back. We've spent 2 centuries preparing for this. Let us share what we've learned." The chamber erupted into argument again. Some ambassadors supported the idea. Others resisted. Pride warring with pragmatism. Ancient prejudices fighting against existential fear. Aldrich watched it all with growing dread. Because Thorne was right. He could see it in the data, in the pattern of attacks, in the sudden appearance of an enemy that the Council's vast military infrastructure couldn't detect or defend against. The galaxy was under assault by beings from another dimension. And the only species who knew how to fight them was humanity. The youngest, the newest. The ones everyone had dismissed as primitives just days ago. The irony was almost funny. Almost. The argument raged for 2 hours before Mordain finally called for order. "Commander Thorne, we will need to discuss this among ourselves. You've given us much to consider. For now, I suggest we adjourn and—" The second alarm cut him off. This one was the station's proximity alert. Aldrich's console flared to life with warnings and tactical data. He pulled it up, read the information, felt his heart skip beats again. "Unidentified contact," he read aloud. "Bearing 351 Mark 7, distance 40,000 kilometers and closing. Classification—" He stopped, looked up at Thorne. "Classification dark matter anomaly." The chamber went silent. "They're here," Thorne said. Her voice was calm, too calm, the calm of someone who'd faced this before and survived. "Station defenses won't stop them. Your weapons can't touch them. You have maybe 5 minutes before they breach the hull." "Then what?" Thorne was already moving. She touched her wrist console, opened a channel. "USS Resolute, this is Commander Thorne. Umbral contact confirmed. Launch interceptor pattern Delta. Execute immediately." Through the chamber's viewport, Aldrich watched the human ships respond. They moved with terrifying speed. One moment hanging motionless in space, the next accelerating toward the incoming threat with velocity that should have liquefied their crews. The lead ship Resolute was already phasing. Its edges blurred, flickered, and then it simply wasn't entirely there anymore, existing in two dimensions at once, ready to fight an enemy that no one else could touch. All Council personnel to designated shelters, Thorne ordered, her voice carrying command authority that even Mordain didn't question. Now move. The chamber emptied in organized chaos, ambassadors and advisors streaming toward the reinforced safe zones that every Council facility maintained. Arya appeared at Thorne's side, Sienna right behind her. Mom, I know, baby. It's okay. Sienna's going to take you to the shelter. No, Arya's voice was small but firm. I stay with you. Thorne knelt down fast, grabbed her daughter by both shoulders. Arya, listen to me. I have to go coordinate the defense. It's not safe. It's not safe anywhere. Arya's eyes were wide but clear. No panic, just determination. You said never again. You promised. So I stay with you. For a moment, Thorne hesitated. Then she nodded, stood, looked at Sienna. She comes with us, both of you, command center. Now, they ran. The Council Station's command center was organized chaos. Tactical officers shouting reports. Sensor technicians trying to track something that kept phasing in and out of their instrument's detection range. Thorne took it all in at a glance, stepped up to the main tactical display. Situation. A Valorant officer, young, scared, but holding it together, responded immediately. Contact is 3 Umbral scouts, smaller than the one at Gateway, but they're not attacking the station. They're probing, testing our defenses. They're learning. Thorne watched the tactical display. Watched the way the Umbral entities move, flowing through space with alien grace. Studying how Council ships respond, what weapons we use, how our shields operate. She touched the console, opened a channel to her fleet. All vessels, this is Thorne. Engagement Protocol 7. I want them contained if possible. We need to send a message. Contained in ma'am, Tisum. The response came from one of her ship commanders. Confused, uncertain. The Council needs to see what we can do, show them we can fight these things, but also show them we can exercise restraint. Capture, not kill. Understood. Understood, Commander. Engaging now. On the tactical display, the human ships moved to intercept. What happened next would be burned into Aldrich's memory for the rest of his very long life. The Umbral scouts detected the human vessels, tried to evade, but the dark matter ships matched them move for move, phasing when they phased, existing in both dimensions simultaneously. It was like watching shadows fight shadows. One of the Umbral scouts lashed out with appendages made of condensed dark matter, struck at USS Nightfall. The ship's hull shimmered. The attack passed through normal space, but connected in the dark matter dimension. Nightfall shuddered, alarms screamed, but it held, and then it struck back. Not with weapons, not with missiles or energy beams, with gravity. Localized gravitational manipulation on a scale that Aldrich's instruments insisted was impossible. The space around the Umbral scout compressed, folded, became a pocket of reality where movement was impossible. The scout was trapped, contained, neutralized without being destroyed. The other 2 scouts tried to flee. USS Resolute cut them off. More gravitational cages, more impossible physics made manifest. 90 seconds after engagement began, all 3 Umbral scouts were captured. The command center was silent, everyone staring at the tactical display, at the impossible thing they just witnessed. Thorne touched her console. All ships secure the prisoners in phase-locked containment. Nice work. Minimal damage, maximum effect. Exactly what we needed. She turned to Aldrich, who stood nearby, his scaled face utterly blank with shock. That's how you fight them, Ambassador. You exist where they exist. You use their own dimension against them, and you show them that humanity learned from the First War. Her eyes were hard, old, filled with memories of battles fought in dimensions he couldn't perceive. We learned that survival isn't enough. You have to be able to strike back, but you also have to know when not to. That's what separates us from them. Arya stood beside her mother, one small hand gripping Thorne's uniform sleeve. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. But she wasn't looking away, wasn't hiding. She was watching, learning, becoming. Aldrich looked at this human child who had just witnessed combat in dimensions that shouldn't exist. At the mother who had brought her daughter to war because leaving her behind was more dangerous than bringing her along. at the 47 ships that had just demonstrated capabilities that made millennia of Council military doctrine obsolete. And he made a decision. Commander Thorne, he said, I believe the Council needs to reconsider your proposal immediately. Thorne nodded. I believe you're right, Ambassador. The alarms faded, the immediate threat passed, but everyone in that command center knew the truth now. The Umbral were back, and the galaxy was not ready. Not even close. The alliance was formalized within 72 hours. Humanity received full Council membership. Equal status with civilizations 10,000 years their senior. Shared military command. Technology exchange protocols. Everything Thorne had asked for. Everything humanity had earned. But the celebrations were short-lived, because the attacks didn't stop. Over the next 6 months, the Umbral struck again and again. Colony worlds, research stations, trade outposts, anything at the edge of explored space. The pattern was clear. They were testing, learning, preparing for something bigger, and the Alliance learned to fight back. Human crews trained Council officers in dark matter combat, shared tactics, developed joint operational protocols. The 47 dark matter ships became the tip of the spear supported by 3,000 Council vessels. It wasn't enough. USS Eclipse was lost covering the evacuation of New Kyoto. Captain Maria Santos and her 200 crew members gone in the time it took light to cross a kilometer. Arya cried for 3 days when she heard. Captain Santos had taught her calculus during the long voyage to the Council station, had shared stories about her own daughter back on Earth. Now she was gone. USS Apollo fell defending Meridian Station. Commander James Wright sent his last message as his ship phased into dark matter space and never returned. Tell my son David I was thinking of him. USS Defiant, USS Stalwart, USS Vanguard, 1,000 crew members dead. 1,000 names added to the list that Thorne carried like stones in her chest. But billions of civilians saved. The math was brutal. The choice was clear. She'd make it again, every time. Commander Cassandra Thorne stood in the war room aboard USS Resolute and studied the tactical display with eyes that had stopped needing sleep 3 days ago. 6 months of war had aged her. Gray threads now visible in her dark hair, lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. A weariness that went bone deep. But her voice was still steady when she spoke. Status report. Lieutenant Commander Sienna Voss looked up from her console. She'd aged too. They all had. Sigma Station holding. Admiral Corps' forces repelled another probe 30 minutes ago. 7 Council ships damaged, but no losses. USS Nightfall assisted. No casualties. Thorne nodded. Small victories. Tasari defensive line. Counselor Lyris reports steady contact. The Umbral are testing their formation, but haven't committed to a full assault. Warlord Kralthos has positioned the Kree fleet in support. They're holding. Kralthos, the proud admiral who challenged humanity 6 months ago, now fought alongside them with grim determination. Turned out that staring into the abyss together built trust faster than decades of diplomacy. Casualties. Sienna's expression tightened. Council forces lost 43 vessels in the last 72 hours. Estimated crew losses around 8,000. Civilian evacuations from the border colonies are 60% complete. We've saved approximately 2 billion souls so far. Saved, not protected, not defended. Saved, because you couldn't defend against the Umbral. You could only run and hope you ran fast enough. The door to the war room opened. Dr. Helena Wright entered, tablet in hand, expression intense. Commander, I have something. Thorne turned. Good news or bad news? Both. Wright pulled up a holographic display, overlaid it on the tactical map. We've been tracking Umbral movement patterns, analyzing attack vectors, trying to find the source. Lines of probability appeared on the map, converging, flowing toward a single point at the edge of explored space. They're all coming from here. Wright highlighted the convergence point. We call it the threshold, a stable tear between normal space and dark matter substrate, a door they're using to enter our dimension. Thorne felt something cold settle in her gut. How stable? Very. It's not natural. It's artificial or semi-artificial. The Umbral built it or grew it. We're not sure of the correct terminology. Can we destroy it? Wright hesitated. Yes, but it would require simultaneous phase detonation from every remaining dark matter ship in the fleet. The cascade effect would collapse the dimensional bridge. 42 ships, 8,400 crew members, everything they had. What's the bad news? The energy release would be massive, and because we'd be detonating in dark matter space, Wright met Thorne's eyes. The cascade could propagate through the entire dark matter substrate, Every umbral, everywhere. Total extinction. The war room went silent. Genocide. Complete. Absolute. Final. One command. 42 ships, and an entire species erased from existence. Thorne stared at the display, at the threshold, at the convergence point where shadows bled into reality. Prepare the calculations, she said quietly. I want options. Wright nodded and left. Sienna stepped closer. Commander, you're not actually considering... I'm considering all possibilities. That's my job. But her voice was hollow because she'd already made her decision. She just didn't want to admit it yet. The next 3 weeks blurred together. More battles, more evacuations, more names added to the list. But Dr. Wright's discovery changed everything. The threshold. The source. A target they could actually strike. High Chancellor Mordain convened an emergency council session. Every ambassador, every military commander. The chamber packed to capacity. Thorne presented the plan, simple in concept, terrifying in execution. Strike the threshold, collapse the dimensional bridge, cut the umbral off from normal space. What's the cost? Mordain asked. Thorne didn't flinch. Every dark matter ship we have, 42 vessels, 8,400 crew members. They'll need to phase into dark matter space and detonate their cores simultaneously. Silence. You're asking your people to commit suicide, Velcro said quietly. I'm asking them to do what humanity has done for 200 years. Whatever it takes to survive. Whatever it takes to protect the people we love. She paused. But there's something else you need to know. Wright's data appeared on the display. Cascade of calculations. Propagation models. If we execute this strike, the energy release will be massive. It may propagate through dark matter space. If it does, Thorne met their eyes. Every umbral, everywhere, gone. Counselor Lyra stood slowly. Her silver skin was still dull with grief. 12 million of her people dead on Tassari 7. Genocide, she said softly. Yes, they killed my people, attacked without warning, without mercy. I know. And you're asking us to show them mercy. Thorne shook her head. I'm not asking anything. I'm telling you what the options are, what the consequences will be, and then I'm going to make a decision, because that's what commanders do. She looked around the chamber, at beings from a dozen species, civilizations that had existed for thousands of years, all of them looking at one human woman for answers. My grandmother survived the Denver massacre. She watched millions die. She spent her life making sure it would never happen again, and she taught me something. Thorne's voice was steady, firm. She taught me that never again doesn't mean revenge. It means justice. It means building a world where children don't have to grow up afraid. It means being better than the things that hurt us. She pulled up an image. Aria's school records from before the war. Pictures of a 10-year-old girl drawing stars. My daughter wants to be an engineer. She wants to build things, create, explore. She's 10 years old and she's spent the last 6 months living on a warship watching people die, learning that the universe is cruel and dark and dangerous. Thorne's jaw tightened. I won't let this war take that from her. Won't let it teach her that the answer to cruelty is more cruelty, that the response to genocide is genocide, that survival justifies any action, no matter how monstrous. She closed the file. We're going to destroy the threshold. We're going to seal the dimensional bridge, but we're going to do it in a way that minimizes the cascade effect, that cuts them off without exterminating them. And if that's not possible, Aldrich asked gently, then we'll accept higher casualties on our side. We'll lose more ships, more crew. We'll pay the price for choosing mercy over efficiency. Thorne turned to face the full assembly, because that's what separates us from them. That's what makes us worth saving, not our technology, not our ships, our choice, the choice to be better. Even when it costs us, especially when it costs us. The chamber was silent. Then Mordain stood, ancient and tired and carrying the weight of 100,000 years of civilization. The Council supports Commander Thorne's decision. We will commit our forces to support the strike on the threshold, and we will honor humanity's restraint by exercising our own. One by one, the other ambassadors stood, even Velcros. They stood because they understood. This was the moment, the choice that would define what kind of galaxy they wanted to build. After the session, Aldrich approached Thorne privately. Commander, I have a request. Ambassador, permission to observe from Resolute's bridge for the historical record. Thorne studied him, 400 years old, the eldest diplomat in the council. He'd seen empires rise and fall, witnessed countless moments of galactic importance. But this was different. This was personal for him now. "It's not safe," she said. "Neither is anything else." Aldrich's expression was resolute. "I've lived 400 years without witnessing anything that truly mattered. Let me witness this. Let me record what happens when the galaxy chooses to be better than its worst impulses." Thorn nodded slowly. "Dock at Port 3. Welcome aboard." Aldrich placed a scaled hand on her shoulder. "Your grandmother would be proud." Thorn's throat felt tight. "I hope so." The fleet gathered at Point Omega 300,000 kilometers from the threshold. 3,000 council vessels arranged in defensive formation. 42 human dark matter ships positioned for the final strike. Aboard USS Resolute, Thorn walked through the quarters one last time. Lieutenant Markov, 19 years old, genius with phase calculations, wanted to be a teacher after the war. Ensign Patterson, 23, engaged to a girl back on Earth, carried her picture in his pocket. Dr. Wright, 51 years old, spent her entire career chasing questions about dark matter. Finally got answers. Wished she hadn't. Each one a name, a story, a life that might end in the next few hours. She reached the bridge. Arya was there in her observer seat. Aldrich stood nearby, his recording equipment active. Sienna at her station, Wright at her console, the crew at their posts. Everyone ready, everyone knowing what came next. Thorn sat in the command chair, looked at her daughter. Arya's face was pale but composed. 10 years old going on 40. War had stolen her childhood, but it hadn't broken her. Not yet. "You ready, baby?" Arya nodded. "Are you?" Thorn smiled. It was a tired smile. "No, but let's do it anyway." She opened the fleet-wide channel. "All vessels, this is Commander Thorn. Final mission brief. 3,000 council ships, 42 dark matter vessels. Over 2 million souls listening. In a few minutes, we're going to destroy the threshold. We're going to seal the door between dimensions. We're going to end this war." She paused. "Some of us won't come back. The math is brutal. The percentages are against us. We know this. We accept this." Her voice strengthened. "But I want you to understand what we're fighting for. We're not fighting for revenge. We're not fighting to hurt the Umbral. We're fighting so that children can grow up without fear. So that families can build homes without wondering if shadows will tear them apart. So that the galaxy can remember what peace feels like." She looked at Arya, met her daughter's eyes. "We're fighting for tomorrow, for the future, for every child who dreams of touching the stars." Back to the view screen. "We have the power to destroy, to exterminate, to end the Umbral completely. And we're choosing not to. We're choosing restraint. We're choosing mercy, because that's who we are. That's what humanity means." She took a breath. After the Holocaust, the world chose never again. They didn't mean revenge. They meant justice systems, war crimes tribunals, consequences, yes, but not extermination, not genocide. We honor that legacy today. We strike the threshold. We seal the breach. But we don't become monsters to fight monsters. That's the line we don't cross. Silence across the fleet. Then from 42 ships, 8,400 voices. "Understood, Commander." Not cheers, not battle cries, just understanding, acceptance. And underneath it, something that might have been pride. Thorn looked at Aldrich. The Valorant ambassador's recording equipment was capturing everything, preserving this moment for history. "For the record, Ambassador, when you write about this moment, I want you to remember something." "What's that, Commander?" "We weren't heroes. We were people. Scared people, tired people, people who wanted to go home, but we did what needed to be done because someone had to. That's all." Aldrich nodded slowly. "I'll remember." "All ships," Thorn said. "Phase transition in 60 seconds. Execute on my mark." The countdown began. 60. Arya's hand found her mother's. Squeezed tight. 45. The ship's phase drives came online. Reality shimmered at the edges. The bridge existed in 2 places at once. 30. Through the view screen, Thorn could see the other vessels beginning their transitions. Dark matter ships flickering like candles in wind. 15. Dr. Wright's voice, phase calculations locked. Cascade protocols calibrated for minimal propagation. "We're as ready as we're going to be." 10. Aldrich's voice on the private channel. "Commander Thorn, whatever happens, it was an honor." Thorn smiled. "The honor was mine, Ambassador." "Mayahui 4, 3. Arya whispered, "I love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. 2, 1. Execute. USS Resolute and 41 sister ships plunged into dark matter space. The transition was violent. Reality screamed. Physics bent. The laws that govern normal matter became suggestions, guidelines, approximations that only sometimes applied. Thorne's vision doubled, tripled. She could see the bridge in front of her and the bridge that existed in dark matter space and the space between spaces where neither fully existed. Beside her, Arya gasped, seeing it too, feeling it, the wrongness of existing partially outside reality. Aldrich gripped the railing, his scales rippling with colors that suggested deep distress. But his recording equipment kept running, documenting, preserving. Steady, Thorne said, to her crew, to her daughter, to herself. We've trained for this. Trust your instruments. The threshold loomed before them, massive, impossible. A wound in the fabric of existence that bled darkness into light. Up close, it was even more terrible than the sensors had suggested. It pulsed, breathed, as if it were alive. Maybe it was. All ships formation Delta, approach vector locked. On my mark, prepare for simultaneous core overload. 42 ships arranged themselves around the threshold, positioning, calculating, preparing to unleash forces that would tear holes in dimensions. And then the umbral came, thousands of them, tens of thousands, pouring out of the threshold like blood from a wound. They'd been waiting, of course they had. This was their door, their way home, and humanity was trying to seal it. Council forces engage, keep them off us. We need 2 minutes. The 3,000 Council vessels opened fire. Energy beams and missiles and every weapon they developed over millennia of warfare. Most of it passed harmlessly through the umbral, but some connected. Just enough. Because they'd been learning too. 6 months of fighting alongside humanity. 6 months of watching dark matter tactics. They weren't helpless anymore, but they were still outmatched. The umbral swarmed the human fleet. USS Heracles took the first hit, umbral appendages tearing through her phase-shifted hull. The ship shuddered. Alarms screamed. Then USS Vigilant, USS Triumph, ships dying, phasing out of existence. Crew members screaming across communication channels and then going silent. Going dark. Going forever. Hold the line, Thorne's voice cut through the chaos. All vessels maintain formation. We're committed, USS. Resolute shook as an umbral scout struck. The gravity plating failed for 3 seconds. Everything not secured went floating. Arya's restraints held, but Thorne saw the terror in her eyes, saw her daughter's childhood dying in real time. Phase drives at maximum. Dr. Wright's voice was ragged. 30 seconds to critical mass. 30 seconds. Might as well be eternity. USS Nightfall was hit hard. Captain Rodriguez fighting to keep his ship together. Resolute, we're losing containment. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7. Can you hold? We'll hold. Just finish this. 20 seconds. USS Valor went dark. Life support failure. The crew would suffocate long before help could reach them. 15 seconds. And then Warlord Kralthos' voice cut across the chaos. Human vessels, this is the Kree battle group. We're coming in. Hold tight. Impossible. Council ships couldn't fight in dark matter space. Couldn't phase, couldn't but Kralthos didn't care about impossible. He drove his flagship straight into the umbral swarm. No phase technology, no dark matter weapons. Just raw courage and 3,000 tons of battleship used as a battering ram. The umbral scattered. Not from damage, from sheer surprise. No one had ever done that before. And in that moment of confusion, the human fleet had the window they needed. 10 seconds, all ships prepare for core overload. Thorne looked at Arya one last time. Her daughter's face was pale, terrified, but she wasn't looking away. She was watching, learning, becoming. I'm sorry, Thorne whispered. Don't be. Arya's voice was steady. You're doing the right thing. 5 seconds. Dr. Wright appeared on screen. Tears streaming down her face, but her voice professional. Commander, I need final confirmation. If we do this, the cascade, minimal propagation. Seal the threshold only. That's the order. But we could end them all. That's not who we are, Doctor. Execute. Wright nodded, hands flying across her console. 3, 2, 1, and then Dr. Wright stopped. Her hands hovered over the final sequence. Commander, there might be another way. What? If we can create a stable phase bubble before detonation, we could theoretically ride the blast wave back to normal space. It's never been tested. Chances of success, 3.7%. Thorne's heart hammered. But it's not zero. It's not zero. How long to set it up? 90 seconds. 90 seconds while the umbral tore them apart. 90 seconds of hell. But a chance. A slim chance. Better than certain death. Do it. All remaining ships cover us. The fleet responded. 42 ships became a desperate perimeter, holding off thousands of umbral. Buying time measured in heartbeats. USS Thunderbolt destroyed. 150 crew lost. 80 seconds. USS Perseus crippled. Captain Yuki Tanaka self-destructed to take out an umbral swarm. 60 seconds. 3 more ships lost buying time. 45 seconds. Phase bubble forming. Wright's voice was shaking. It's unstable but holding 30 seconds. The umbral threw everything at them. Thousands of shadow creatures trying to stop what they knew was coming. 15 seconds. Wright, bubble stable as it's going to get. 10 seconds. All ships enter the bubble now. The surviving vessels phased into the protective sphere Wright had created. A pocket of stable space-time in the middle of chaos. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 42 dark matter cores overloaded simultaneously. The energy release was beyond measurement, beyond comprehension. Space screamed, dimensions folded. The threshold collapsed in on itself like a dying star. And for just a moment, Cassandra Thorne could see everything. She could see dark matter space in its entirety, could see the umbral civilization stretching across dimensions. Billions of them, trillions maybe, living their incomprehensible lives in substrate reality. She could see what they would become if she let the cascade propagate. Could see them dying, all of them, every single one. Extinction on a scale that would make every genocide in history look like a rounding error. She had the power. One command, one choice. End them forever. Make sure they could never threaten anyone again. Never kill another human child. Never turn another sky black. It would be so easy, so justified, so final. But then she looked at Arya, her daughter watching with wide eyes, learning, absorbing, becoming whoever this moment would make her. And Thorne made her choice. The cascade stopped at the threshold, collapsed it, sealed it, cut the connection between dimensions. But nothing more. The umbral in dark matter space survived, would live, would remember. And maybe someday they would understand why humanity chose not to destroy them when they had the chance. Or maybe they wouldn't. It didn't matter. What mattered was that Thorne could look her daughter in the eye afterward, could teach her that strength wasn't the same as cruelty, that power came with responsibility. That being better than your enemies meant choosing restraint even when revenge was easier. The explosion faded. Reality reasserted itself. The fleet phased back into normal space. Thorne took inventory. 42 ships went in. 37 came back. 5 vessels lost in the final moments. USS Heracles, USS Vigilant, USS Triumph, USS Dauntless, USS Relentless. 1,000 crew members gone. 1,410 total. 15% casualties. Within parameters. Except there were no acceptable parameters when you were counting the dead. But 2 billion civilians saved. The threshold sealed. The war over. Thorne sat in the command chair and felt every one of her 47 years pressing down on her. Beside her, Arya was crying, silent tears streaming down her face. Not tears of fear anymore. Tears of grief, of loss, of understanding what victory really cost. Thorne unbuckled, went to her daughter, held her while the bridge crew maintained their professional composure, and the tactical displays showed council vessels securing the area. It was over. They'd won. But victory tasted like ashes. Aldrich stood nearby, his recording equipment still running, capturing this moment. The aftermath, the con. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. You could have destroyed them all. Yes. Why didn't you? Thorne looked at Arya, at her daughter who would carry this memory for the rest of her life. Because I want her to know that we're better than that we don't answer genocide with genocide, that mercy isn't weakness, it's strength. She met Aldrich's eyes. And because if we'd done it, if we'd exterminated them, what would that make us? We'd have become the very thing we were fighting against. The thing that kills without mercy, without restraint. Aldrich nodded slowly. For the historical record, humanity chose mercy when it had the power to choose vengeance. That choice may define your species for millennia to come. I hope so, Ambassador. I hope so. 2 weeks later, the memorial service was held on Gateway Station. 1,410 names read aloud. 1,410 crew members who would never go home. Lieutenant Dorian Cavanaugh, USS Nightfall. Survived by wife Isla and daughter Neve, age 5. Commander Rhiannon Vale, USS Eclipse. Survived by son Caden, age 11. Captain Yuki Tanaka, USS Perseus. Survived by parents and 2 sisters. On and on, names and ranks and the families left behind. Thorne stood at the podium and tried to find words that didn't feel hollow. They gave their lives so that billions could live. They fought in dimensions that human minds weren't meant to perceive. They faced extinction and chose mercy. They were heroes. She paused, looked at the assembled crowd, thousands of beings, human and alien alike, come to honor the dead. But they were also parents, children, siblings, friends. They were people who loved and laughed and dreamed, and they're gone. Her voice cracked slightly. We can't bring them back, can't undo their sacrifice, but we can honor it by building a galaxy worthy of what they gave, by teaching our children that strength isn't cruelty. That power comes with responsibility, that we're defined not by what we can destroy, but by what we choose to protect. She stepped back from the podium. The names continued. 1,410 lives compressed into sounds, syllables, memories that would fade with time. After the service, families approached Thorne, one by one, some to thank her, some to curse her, some just to be acknowledged. Neve Kavanaugh, 5 years old, held her mother's hand and looked up at Thorne with huge eyes. Are you the commander? Yes. Mommy says you knew Daddy. Thorne knelt down, eye level with this child who would grow up without her father. I did. He was brave. He saved a lot of people. Mommy says he's a hero. He is. Neve was quiet for a moment. Then, can I have his medal? Thorne reached into her pocket, pulled out Dorian Kavanaugh's insignia, the one they'd recovered from Nightfall's wreckage. She pressed it into Neve's small hand. Your father loved the stars. He told me once that he hoped you'd love them too. Neve clutched the medal to her chest. I do. Then make him proud. Reach for them. Touch them. Show him that his sacrifice meant something. Isla Kavanaugh's eyes were wet. Thank you, Commander. Thorne stood. I'm sorry I couldn't bring him home. You brought my daughter home, and 2 billion others. That's enough. Was it? Thorne didn't know, but it would have to be. She moved through the crowd, spoke to each family, each child, each widow, each parent. Caden Vale, 11 years old, his mother dead at the threshold. She was proud of you, Thorne told him. Her last transmission mentioned you. She said to tell you to keep studying engineering, that you were going to build amazing things. Caden nodded, unable to speak. Emma Wright, daughter of Dr. Helena Wright's cousin, asking questions about dark matter because she wanted to understand what her aunt had died for. On and on, each one a wound, a reminder, a life forever changed. After the last family left, Thorne stood alone in the memorial expo. Aldrich approached. He'd been there throughout, recording, documenting, preserving. The council is discussing something, he said quietly. What? The Umbral prisoners, the 3 scouts we captured. There's a faction that wants them executed. War crimes. Justice was done. Thorne felt exhaustion wash over her. And what do you think? I think, Aldrich said slowly, that humanity has shown us a different path. A harder path, but perhaps a better one. Trials, Thorne said, not executions. Due process. War crimes tribunals like we did after World War II. Nuremberg, not lynch mobs. That's what I recommended to the Chancellor. Good, because if we execute them without trial, we're no better than they are. Justice isn't revenge. It's accountability. Aldrich was quiet for a long moment. Then you know that not everyone will agree. Some species lost billions. They want blood. I know, but that's the price of being better, of building something that lasts. Quick vengeance feels good in the moment, but it doesn't heal. It doesn't teach. It doesn't build a future. She looked at the wall of names. These people didn't die so we could become monsters. They died so we could be better. 3 months after the memorial service, a transmission arrived at Gateway Station. Thorne was in her quarters helping Arya with her mathematics homework when Sienna appeared at the door. Commander, you need to see this. Something in her voice made Thorne's blood run cold. What is it? Just come see. They rushed to the communications center. Sienna pulled up a data stream. Static at first, then a voice. Familiar. Impossible. Commander Thorne, this is Captain Rodriguez. USS Nightfall. Can you hear me? Thorne stared at the screen. Her heart stopped. Rodriguez was dead. Nightfall had been crippled at the threshold. Hull breaches. Life support failure. This is impossible, she whispered. The transmission continued. We're not dead, Commander. We're somewhere else. When nightfall took damage, we couldn't maintain our phase lock. We slipped sideways, into a stable pocket in dark matter space. The voice crackled. 37 crew members survived. We found others, Eclipse crew, Valor, Hermes, Perseus, 800 souls total. We're all here, building something. Thorne's hands shook. How, ma'am? When the threshold collapsed, the blast wave pushed us deeper into dark matter substrate. We found a stable region, a pocket where the laws of physics still make sense, where we can survive. Rodriguez's voice grew stronger. We're building a colony here, Commander, a permanent human presence in dark matter space, a watch post. Because if the Umbral ever try to return, they'll find us waiting. Can you come back? Silence. Then we don't know. We're working on it. But for now, we're staying. Someone needs to keep the watch from this side. The transmission began to break up. Tell Arya, tell her we're keeping the watch from inside the dark. Humanity doesn't abandon its posts. One last burst of clarity. Tell the families we're alive. Tell them we're not coming home yet, but we're still fighting, still protecting, still human. Rodriguez out. The transmission ended. Thorne sat in silence for long minutes. 800 crew members. Not dead, not gone. Alive. Trapped in dark matter space, but alive. Building a colony in dimensions humans weren't meant to inhabit. Standing watch against threats from the other side. She started laughing, couldn't help it. The sound was half laughter, half sob. Of course they survived, she said to no one in particular. Of course they did. And Sienna looked confused. Ma'am, they're human, Thorne said. We don't know how to give up. We don't know how to quit. You put us in impossible situations and we just adapt. Survive. Build. She wiped her eyes. Get me a secure channel to Admiral Core and contact every family on the memorial list. Anyone whose loved one was on Nightfall, Eclipse, Valor, Hermes, or Perseus. What do I tell them? Tell them their people are alive. Tell them they're heroes. Tell them they're still out there, still fighting, still protecting us. Thorne stood, felt lighter than she had in months. The casualty count had just dropped. 410 dead became 610. 800 survivors building a future in the dark. 800 souls proving that humanity couldn't be killed by mere impossibility. She found Arya and told her, watched her daughter's face transform from grief to wonder. They're alive, Captain Rodriguez, Commander Vale. Yes, baby, they're alive. Can we talk to them? Not easily. The transmission was one way, but they're out there watching over us. Arya was quiet for a moment. Then, Mom, when I grow up, I want to help them. I want to build a way to bring them home. Thorne pulled her daughter close. Then that's what you'll do, and I'll help you every step of the way. 5 years later, the Gateway Academy auditorium was packed for graduation. 200 students, humans and aliens both. The first generation educated in the post-war galaxy, learning together, growing together, building a future their parents had died to protect. Arya Thorne, age 15, stood backstage and tried not to panic. Valedictorian meant a speech, in front of everyone. All those people expecting her to say something profound. She'd written 23 drafts. This time, though, she was happy with the final version. Her mother appeared beside her. 47 had become 52. Gray threads, now silver streaks, but Olivia wasn't here. Nervous a little, Thorne smiled. Good, means you care. What if I mess up? Then you'll be human, that's allowed. The announcement came, next speaker, Arya Thorne. Arya took a breath, walked onto the stage. The applause was overwhelming. Humans and Valorans, and Cray and Tessuri, all standing, all honoring not just her, but what her generation represented. She reached the podium, found her mother's face in the crowd, and the words came. When I was 10 years old, I was terrified of the dark. The auditorium went silent. I lived through the Umbral War, watched people die, saw my mother fight in dimensions I couldn't understand. I was scared all the time, every second. She paused. My mother taught me something. She taught me that darkness is just space waiting for light, that fear is just energy waiting to be transformed, that the shadows we're most afraid of can only hurt us if we let them. Arya activated a holographic display. A device appeared above the stage, a dark matter reactor, compact, efficient, beautiful. This is my graduation project, a civilian dark matter power generator. It uses the same principles that drove our warships but repurposed, reimagined, transformed from destruction to creation. She looked at her mother. It can power a city of 1 million for a year on the energy contained in a cubic meter of space. No fuel, no waste, no environmental impact. The crowd murmured, scientists leaning forward, taking notes. My mother's generation learned to fight in the dark. They showed the galaxy our weapons, our ships, our ability to survive. Arya's voice strengthened. My generation is showing you what we can do with peace, what we can build when we're not fighting for our lives, what happens when you give humanity hope instead of fear. The hologram shifted, showed applications, cities powered by dark matter, ships exploring distant galaxies, medical technology, agricultural advances. This is my thank you to the 610 who died so I could stand here, to the 800 who still stand watch in dark matter space, to my mother who chose mercy when revenge would have been easier. She paused. To everyone who fought to protect tomorrow. The hologram showed one more image, a communication array, sophisticated, powerful. And this is my promise. I'm going to build a bridge, a stable connection to dark matter space. I'm going to bring our people home. She looked directly at the cameras broadcasting across the galaxy. To Captain Rodriguez and the colony, we haven't forgotten you. We're coming. It might take years, it might take decades, but we're coming. To every child watching this, you don't have to be afraid anymore. The shadows are just space, and space is what we make of it. Arya stepped back from the podium. The applause started slowly, then built, became a thunderous wave. Thorne stood in the crowd, tears streaming down her face. Her daughter had taken the darkness they'd fought and transformed it into light, had taken the weapons of war and reimagined them as tools of peace, had proved that the next generation wasn't defined by what they'd survived, but by what they chose to build. After the ceremony, they stood together outside watching the sunset over Gateway Station. I'm proud of you, Thorne said. I learned from the best. You surpassed it, just like I told you to. Arya leaned against her mother. Thank you for keeping your promise, for coming back, for showing me that strength isn't cruelty. Thorne wrapped an arm around her daughter. Thank you for reminding me why we fought, why we chose mercy, why we're worth saving. They watched the stars emerge. Arya pointed. NGC 1300, Spiral Galaxy, 70 million light years away. What about it? That's where I'm going. After I finish my doctorate and build the bridge to dark matter space, going to build a research station there, study galaxy formation, maybe find other civilizations who need help. Thorne smiled. Of course you are. Will you come visit every chance I get? Promise, promise. In the distance, Council Station gleamed. Humans and aliens working together. Building, creating, exploring. The dark matter fleet patrolled. Both human vessels and now some Council ships. Learning, adapting, protecting. Somewhere in dark matter space, 800 souls stood watch. Alive, fighting, waiting for the bridge home. And somewhere in the substrate of reality, the Umbrella existed. Cut off but not destroyed. Living their incomprehensible lives. Maybe they remembered. Maybe they understood why humanity had spared them. Or maybe they'd already forgotten. It didn't matter. What mattered was the choice itself, the line humanity drew and refused to cross. The mercy they showed when revenge would have been easier. That was their legacy. Not the weapons, not the ships, not the victories, the restraint, the humanity, the light they brought to the darkness. Aldrich Corvin, now retired from active diplomacy, but still recording history, watched from nearby. He'd documented it all. The arrival, the war, the choice, the aftermath. 5 years of galactic transformation compressed into data and memory. He approached Thorne and Arya. For the historical record, and he said, what do you want future generations to know about this era? Thorne thought for a long moment. Tell them we were scared. Tell them we made mistakes. Tell them we lost people we loved and carried those losses forever. She looked at Arya. But tell them we chose to be better anyway. Even when it was hard. Even when it cost us. Even when revenge would have been easier. We chose mercy. We chose justice. We chose hope. Aldrich nodded. Recorded it all. And one more thing, Arya added. Tell them that darkness is just space waiting for light, and that humans are pretty good at making light. They stood together as the last rays of sun faded and the stars came out. Earth visible in the distance, blue and green and alive. Home. Worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth choosing mercy for. Thorne felt Alara's metal beneath her uniform. The inscription she'd carried for decades. Never forget, never again. She understood it now. Truly understood. It didn't mean never forget the pain. It meant never forget the choice. The choice to be better, to show mercy, to build instead of destroy, to bring light to the darkness. And as she stood there with her daughter and her friend watching the stars that humanity had fought so hard to protect, Cassandra Thorne felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace.